Welcome back, guys. Papa Pepper here. I'm going to be answering one of the questions from my recent AMAA, my Ask Me Almost Anything. This one comes from the Big Blue House Homestead, and they asked, what was your life like before getting your homestead? Did you still garden and have animals? And that is a good question. I happen to be exploring an interesting part of Katy Trail up in Missouri near Boonville, I think. And I may be a little out of breath as I answer some of this. All I can recommend is that you do not smoke heavily a variety of things for like a decade. That wreaks havoc on your lungs and you won't appreciate it when you get older. And if you're older, don't start now. So life, of course, goes through a lot of phases, as that warning may kind of clue you into. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna back up to right kind of the year before we moved this way, down into the Ozarks. And pretty much at that point, we'd made a number of interesting lifestyle changes already. I was clean and sober for one. My wife gave up on her goals of being a dental hygienist, and she started homeschooling the children. And we had about 4 at that point. The last one we had up there, Sweet Pepper, we had in our living room. Midwife assisted home water birth. So if you think about that, you know, we were already home birthing at that point, doing things a little differently, homeschooling at that point, doing things a little differently. We'd exited the institutional church at that point and had begun home churching too, house fellowships. So a little bit different stuff going on at that point. I was the sole provider for the family. So I was working, my job was usually 6 in the morning till 1:30 in the afternoon. So most days I was home by 2. We had 2 cars, we had 1 house. We were aggressively paying off the mortgage. We took yearly trips down to South Texas, like 28, 29 hours away. And that was about it. You know, sometimes my work schedule would be 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week. Sometimes we'd work 13 days on, 1 off, and we could give up one of our days off, so we could work 27 days on, 1 off. Obviously, if you're trying to do anything besides work, that's not an ideal situation, even if you're home every day by 2 or 3. So we had a 1/4 acre in the city, a small lot, and we had a garden. Papa Pepper, of course, like hot peppers, so I started off doing a lot of the gardening and just growing a variety of hot peppers from around the world. That was kind of my fun thing to do. And as we began having children and having more and more of them, began realizing the benefit of actual food besides just hot peppers. So started growing some actual food at that point too, and had thought about beginning to get some sort of animals. As the main provider and earthly provider and steward of my family, I wanted to make sure to be doing a good job. And I realized, you know, if the power went out for like 2 weeks in winter, I was in quite a situation. Because I wouldn't be able to heat my house. We didn't have a wood stove. I wouldn't be able to feed my family much, just kind of whatever we had on hand. And it'd kind of be like checkmate endgame. You lose, kind of a, I don't know, life-threatening situation. And I didn't really appreciate that. I thought if we could adjust the life to somewhere where you kill a goat, light a candle, and throw a log on the fire, and life goes on, that'd be more beneficial. You couldn't really have any animals that provided you with meat, milk, or eggs where we were living. Kind of realized as I thought back on that, I'm like, well, that's kind of almost like a setup. Kind of like almost people made it that way, where anything that could benefit you in those ways was suddenly illegal and you weren't able to have. And I didn't like that either. I thought that was not a good situation to be in, where an animal for a companion is fine, but an animal that'll actually feed you in any way is illegal. And right before we left, we actually got to the point in that city where you could have, I think up to 6 chickens, but no rooster. but you had to make your setup up to a certain number of requirements. You had to get a yearly permit that you paid a fee for, and then beyond that, you had to pretty much, part of it was you were then giving the local police department pretty much free access to your property 24 hours a day, 365 days a week, where they could show up at any point they wanted to unannounced and just be there. And I thought, well, that's a little goofy to me. Oh, there's like a lizard hiding under this rock out there. I don't know what kind it is. There's a lot of invasive Asian carp out there and a lot of turtles, but I'm gonna see if I can find this lizard quick. Well, that was actually just a leopard frog hiding under there. All I could see is something was peeking out, getting shade from the sun under that little thing. But I'm at this cool cave overlooking a bunch of stuff. So, as you could tell, we were living a rather comfortable life. We were surviving off of one income. We were taking, yearly trips down to Texas and Mexico. We had 2 vehicles, bought and paid for. The only debt we had was our house. And look at the ground over here. You can see it, the whole thing is just ant lions, which is really cool. If you're not familiar with ant lions, the little larval stages of the ant lion, flying creature that live in the ground, and when bugs fall down in that little hole, they try to get out and they drag them underneath the surface, kind of like a tremor, but they'll like flick sand up at them to knock them back down to the middle of that vortex and pull them under. But anyway, we were pretty much set. We had no problems with the life we were living. We enjoyed it. My work was demanding at times, but I was home for a good portion of time every day. And it wasn't always, 13 on, 1 off or 27 on, 1 off. The only debt we had was the house. We're paying that off rather quickly, but we realized we were in a fragile state of affairs. Now, we bought the house in 2010, 2 weeks after we had our first daughter, Pinky Pepper. We were doing fine, but that whole realizing just how fragile it was, realizing just how easy it could be checkmate, endgame, you lose, is what didn't set right with us. So it was at that point that we began to figure out, okay, how do we do this easier? How do we change life? We started providing some of our own food and stuff like that, but that's pretty much where we were at and kind of what led to the changes that we made in our life. It was just to try to set up, how do we stay warm rather than freezing to death if something happens in the winter? How do we keep fed if something happens to the food chain? How do we keep living somewhere if the economic system collapses? Because even that, we did not own our home. It was the banks. It's kind of sad when people say, oh, do you rent or do you own your home? Because most people who answer own their home don't. The bank's the one who owns the house. So that's where we're at that time. So then the main part became just how to restructure our lives to free ourselves up. And by making the move we did, we now no longer have any debt. We're able to buy our house outright. We have animals. We have that freedom now. And as soon as I get a wood stove in, we'll be able to heat the house too. So that's what life was like before. That's why we now choose to live the life we do now. Seems a lot of people right now are considering that too. So if you guys got a similar story or you're thinking about similar things, feel free to leave a little bit of that in the comment section below. Tell us where you're at, where you're from, what you're up to. We're just a couple of years into this journey. Moved down at the end of 2015 and only been on our land for a couple of years, so we'll see. That's probably from the train, huh? Oh, there's a boat. Asian carp are going here. Oh yeah, they're jumping and hitting this boat. Interesting.
One jumped in.
One jumped in?
Yep.
I gotta come bow fishing somewhere like this where you can hit them in the air. Crazy invasive Asian carp. That was crazy. I decided to go look a little closer to the water because there was a bunch of turtles and stuff down there. I take like one step off the side of the path into the bushes and all of a sudden I'm like, ow, ow, ow. And I look down and I'm standing in a yellow jacket's nest. So I'm standing by the entrance where they have their underground hive, and probably took at least 6 really good stings to the leg, maybe more. My calves are pretty pretty numb with pain right now, but there was some plantain and jewelweed there, so I made a quick salve and kind of applied some. But of all the places to step off into the bushes, right on top of the yellow jacket nest, that'll make you stronger. But that's it for this time. Appreciate that question. Big Blue House Homestead, thank you for that question. Very good question, and we'll see you guys next time. Pop out.